That's how Trump's gonna have to do his rallies now, fucking.
Patriot Podcast.
Welcome back to the channel. My name is Michael, and you have joined the Patriot Podcast. Today, we have to ask the question, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? And it's a legitimate question, right? Before we get to that point, I just want to thank people, first of all, for the feedback and the encouragement from my prior video, the Star Spangled Banner cover. I was a little emotional, not gonna lie. I was a little bit caught up right after the assassination attempt. I saw it as an attack on our freedoms, on our government, and pretty much the culmination of how I frame it as a marriage gone wrong in our country. So I want to start out with this framework in this discussion. Where do we go from here? By laying the groundwork using family systems theory from Bowen. I was a professional counselor, so my training was in psychology. And I want to examine the recent events using the lens of family systems theory. So why don't we start out with, in family systems theory, there's this idea that if you look at an individual, actually, we're going to start out with this one, Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory, just to give you kind of a graphical representation of what I'm talking about here. So if you want to think of you yourself, putting yourself right in the middle of this whole mess, before you identify as a Republican or a Democrat, you have yourself, your gender, your age, your health status, all that, right? And then you can kind of go up from there to see how all of those other things around you using, is it this one? It's this one. Using the things that are around you influence your individual health, your mental health, your spiritual health, all that stuff, right? Like my neighbor next door, or Jimmy down the street, or my lawyer, or all that stuff. All of these things are swirling around us and they all impact us. Okay. Well, in order for us to understand how we got to the point that we have assassination attempts on our presidential candidate, we have to understand family systems and how things gone wrong. And I don't know what you care or what you think about Tucker Carlson, but he was recently, I'm going to stop sharing this for a second. He was recently able to bring on a guest named Everett Emerson, I believe that's what his name was. And the link will be in the description of this video. And I thought it was an incredibly beneficial interview that he did, talking about how the Democratic Party has kind of aligned themselves with a certain way and shape and form that they have. And the way that I think about what has gone wrong is, I feel like I'm a part of a divorced family. That's what I feel like when I log on YouTube and I go through the comment section, and that's what it feels like. I've had a divorce. I've been a part of one. I've been a part of a toxic family system since the time I was a little kid. I grew up with 2 alcoholics, and I'm not trying to overshare. I'm just trying to share with you. I grew up in a very significantly distressed and dysfunctional family system. So I feel like I know what I'm talking about. All right. I feel confident in that, knowing that what we have in the United States, what started out as a constitutional republic, has now become basically a divorced government. The government is divorced from itself. And now you have all of the children fighting amongst themselves, aligning themselves with one parent over the other. And the Democrats, if you're a Democrat, I mean, I don't think anything less of you. I really don't. I just think that you have aligned yourself with more of a feminine energy. And that feminine energy is beautiful in its own way, right? If you think about it, a pure feminine energy that is secure, that is protected. If you think about like the Bible, right? If you think about Genesis, a woman that is protected and who is able to thrive in her natural environment, knowing that she's safe and protected. Well, I tell you, she can do some really beautiful things. She decorates, she knows details, she connects with people, she connects with details of all the little things, all the birthdays of the kids, and she can decorate the house and make it look nice, right? And so that's where, if you think about from that perspective and you use that lens, looking at and applying that to our government, that's where you get social welfare, and you get, the arts, and you get the humanities, and you get people caring about all of these other extracurricular things that would improve the quality of the life of the citizen. Because if it were just up to the masculine energy, which is where I believe that the Republican Party is aligned itself to, the masculine energy, listen, we'll protect you. We'll keep our military strong. We'll keep our borders strong. We'll lower our taxes to make sure that everybody can fend for themselves and start their own businesses. We'll cut legislation so that we make it much easier for people to go out and to do their own thing. We believe, from the Republican perspective, the masculine energy, that you got to fight for yourself a little bit, right? Just think about it like a father with his son. A father will not hide his son from the world. He'll treat his kid differently. He'll treat his son differently. Why? Because he knows that the son has to become he has to go through that training process and have a couple scars. That's why if you have a kid that falls off his bike, if it's your son, yeah, you give him a little bit of encouragement, you give him a little coddling, but you give him a little pat on the back and be like, yeah, that's a way to go, boy. Nah, don't worry about it. You're fine. And he looks at the elbow and he laughs with his son a little bit, right? Yeah, sure, it hurt, but you laugh it off and you get back on your bike and you keep going. You don't play the victim and then never ride your bike again, right? So having that masculine energy is important for our citizens. It's important that we view this process through the lens of our family systems and what they have to offer, through the lens of feminine and masculine energy, and understanding that both are equally valid. But how did we get to the point of an assassination attempt? Well, let's talk a little bit about dysfunctional family patterns. So going back to this this lens that I'm sharing with you, what happens when you have these major life events that happen out in the real world? Okay, let's say you've got a marriage between a government, you got a marriage between the mother and the father, which is what the Republicans and Democrats, we're married together, whether you like it or not. We're married. The mother and the father are. Right now they're divorced, but anyway. But what happens if a major war happens and the father has to go off to war, and the mother is the one that's left behind and has to take care of all those things? Well, she does the best that she can, but she's not perfect, and she has to wait until the father comes home to kind of reestablish stability in the family. Well, what has happened in our world, if you look at World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, Korean War, the Cold War, then you had Desert Storm, then you had all these events that have happened over and over and over again. There's like these repeated traumas that have happened to a family. And that's what we are. The United States, we're a collection of a whole bunch of different ethnicities and races and cultures. That's what we are. We are a bunch of immigrants. All of us are. Some of us have been here longer than others, but we're all immigrants. And we need time to enculturate ourselves into a belief system that says, which is what this family is supposed to be, where we have a healthy mother, the Democrats, and a healthy father, the Republicans, who can work out their issues in Congress and figure it out and hammer it out so that they can have a discussion amicably, resolve their differences, and find a good balance between left and right ideologies. And what happens? It's that trickle-down effect. Okay. Well, what happens in a family system that's dysfunctional? the members the members will start to split off and to fight among themselves. You have siblings that will start fighting each other. You'll have an imbalance in relationships. And over time, what you'll have is that it'll be transmitted to the next generation in the family. So what we've had is we've had a series of events, traumas, that have disrupted our United States governmental system. And each parent is trying to fight for custody. And that's where you find where we're at. Because what we have had now is we've had, using the family systems model, we've had enmeshment where one political party over-identifies with the victimhood of its citizen. Whether you believe it or not, Black Lives Matter or the LGBTQIA community and the gender wars and the identity politics. All of these are symptoms of the child feeling neglected, feeling abandoned, feeling rejected, feeling misunderstood. And what did they do? They try to use leverage. And that's where you see triangulation, using power like the Department of Justice to try to leverage itself against the father, which is the Republican side. So if you want to look at Donald Trump would just be, he would be what you would consider the masculine energy in this whole situation, right? He's the embattled father trying to fight for custody of his children. And I'm just, listen, call it for what it is. I just see it through the lens of family systems. And I think if you were to listen to somebody like Jordan Peterson, like I do, it would make a lot of sense too, that we are a traumatized nation. We're a dysfunctional family system that is divorced, and we're looking and we're fighting for our identity again. And so I wanted to start out this discussion just by mentioning those lenses to dive into those recent events and shed some light on it using family systems theory. So the real question is where do we go from here? Well, what do they say to do in family systems? The very first thing that you do in a family system is you separate the mother and the father from the children, and you bring them in separately into counseling and start to identify what their own individual problems are. All right. So think of it like triage. You get the father to work on his own stuff with a therapist. You get the mother to work on their own issue with their own therapist. And then you bring them in together for marriage counseling, not family counseling yet, because we are so fragmented away from each other. The Republicans and the Democrats are so far apart from each other. There is no conversations, healthy conversations that are going on across the aisle. And if you look at, I know this may sound a little bit crass, but if you look at the shot across the bow from the Trump rally, it might not be a bad thing that happened in a sense, because it's almost like watching your father getting shot. You realize just how serious this has become. It's like a mother watching the father of her children being shot. If you're a Democrat. And I don't care if you hate Donald Trump or not. I don't care how bad of a father you think he is. I have the same problem going on in my own relationship. I haven't seen my kids in a couple of years. And there is a clear cutoff between the mother and the father in the Democrat and the Republican Party right now. And so having this event happen may not be such a bad thing for our country right now. That's my perspective. So how do you heal it? So in therapy, there's a number of things that you do. First of all, you try to help that individual become more autonomous. help that individual become more of its self and its own strength on its own without having to rely on the children, because that's what has happened in the Democratic Party, is that they've tried to use their children to align themselves against the father. And that's what we call triangulation, using interest groups to try to use that as leverage and power. So the Black community has been leveraged by the Democrats to try to fight against the father, the Republicans. And they're waking up to it now. And they're realizing that they've been used and misused for years and generations, hoping that, as basically being coddled by the mother and giving extra little prizes and extra free things along the way at the expense of the father. What is one of the primary issues that are plaguing the Black community? Well, there's several. Fatherlessness, an absentee father. That's generally what's going on, right? Poverty. And so the Democratic Party tried to align themselves with those issues and use that as a stage, as a platform to try to leverage itself into relevance and get the mother elected over and over and again. And by instituting the mother, by instituting these social welfare policies to try to improve the quality of life of the children at the expense of the father. Nope, you don't get custody. We want power and control of the entire house. We want the entire Senate to be all mothers. And we'll run this shit. We got this. Has it worked? No. No. So, what do you do in therapy? So, in this particular situation, again, you help the mother identify what it is. Democrats, who are you? If we take away your children, your voters, what do you have left? What is your identity? Who are you? And what do you stand for? What are your values? And as a therapist, I would work with that mother to help her learn who she is outside of being a mother. What are your values? What do you stand for? What are your core beliefs? If you want to be aligned with the feminine energy, fine, no problem. You can be the mother that wants to decorate the house and have all these other added things. But you know what? You also have to learn how to compromise, because we can't have all those things at the expense of other people, and especially against the father. You can't do that. That won't work. You can't pine away and just steal away child support and alimony from the father and not have him be a part of the kid's life, because that's what's happened in my own personal life. So and what that does is, again, is it creates that transmission of generational trauma to the next generation. Then you have kids that don't appreciate the father. Children need their father, and they need to know that they're loved by their father. They need that. They absolutely need that. And they have to learn to fend for themselves. They can't be so dependent on a Democratic government, or I'm sorry, a Democrat-run government that just feeds them all the time. Because somebody else, I don't know if you ever heard of something that is called there is no free lunch. Somebody has to pay for that. Somebody has to work hard for that. Somebody has to go out in the field, plant the seed, grow the corn, harvest it, and then make a profit for it. In order for your free lunch program, somebody has to work and make that money. And what happens over time in a dysfunctional family system is you have people who will take advantage of that. The children will take advantage of the dysfunction between the mother and the father, and they will just sit there on welfare as long as they can in order for them to survive. We're all trying to survive right now. And that, I believe, as I've said before, it's all as a result of these traumas that have happened that have caused the mother and the father to split and no longer work together. We need a functional government. We need Democrats and Republicans to work together. But in order for that to happen, you guys, we all have to have a come to Jesus moment. And that's what, if you look at the biblical accounts for what happens, the Bible, whether you choose to believe it or not, it has relevance when it comes to how to deal with these types of issues. So the father and the mother are supposed to work out their issues independently with the father. Okay. So in this particular scenario, again, I think both parties need to have a come to Jesus moment. And if that is as a result of this assassination attempt, then great. But they both need to be sat down and say, who are you and what are you doing to our children? All right. We need to have that happen. We need to have Democrats have a literal meeting among all of their Democratic people and have a come to Jesus moment. And you have to tell the truth. You have to have accountability, and you need to get to the core root of what your issues are. If you're a Democrat, if you're a politician and you are registered as a Democrat, you all need to have a meeting and do that and figure out who you really are. And you might need an independent to come in there. You might need to have some people who are trained in family systems theory, like a Jordan Peterson, come in and talk about the dynamics that you're offering as a Democrat, what you're doing to use special interest groups and identity politics to try to leap forward and gain your positions of power. Because the people will not vote for you now that you've been exposed for misusing the people that you're supposed to be serving. Now, let's talk about the father. Here's the problem with a hypermasculine. If you want to think about a narcissistic father or a father that overly uses his power to gain control in the family, you will also cause dysfunction in the family. You'll have children that will align themselves with the hypermasculinity, the people who like to have power and control. And what do? You create future narcissists. People who can't identify with their feelings, people who can't identify with the people who suffer down at the bottom, people who have poverty and special needs and issues, autisms and depressions and anxieties. All of these children that have these other issues, a narcissist doesn't care about them because it makes them look bad. So Republicans, y'all need to figure out how to balance out your energies better. You can't be all hypermasculine all the time. You definitely need to have discipline. You need to have routine. You need to have structure. You need to be like a tree, not being blown by the wind, blown over by the wind. So you need to be consistent with your politics. So y'all need to have a come to Jesus moment. And I hope that if you're hearing this or you're reading this or you're seeing this or whatever, you understand what I'm trying to get at here. I've been a Republican voter for as long as I can remember, but I'm more independently minded. I feel like I'm right in the middle because I can see both sides of the aisle. I can see both perspectives and I can think autonomously without having to be aligned to a certain thing. But do I think that President Trump is the best candidate? Yes. And here's why for this election cycle. Because he has the most democratic motives in his heart. That's what I've come to believe and understand. Choose to believe whatever you want, but I'm voting for Trump this election cycle. Do I wish that we had a perfect candidate? Sure, but we don't. We don't have a perfect candidate this time around. But I also can't argue with the fact that it looks like God has his hand on Donald Trump. There's no doubt about it in my mind. So I'm voting for Trump this time around. You get to choose who you want to vote for. I like JFK Jr. or RFK Jr. I think he's a great candidate, except for the fact that he affirms killing babies. I can't do that. If you don't value the sanctity of human life, I can't vote for you. No matter how much of a good candidate I think you are, I can't vote for you. You know, and if you really want to get to the root of it, right? You can't sacrifice your children for the next generation to be successful. It just has never worked. Go back in the Old Testament, look at Molech and the sacrifices of the children at the altars. God detested that. You can't sacrifice your children for your own convenience and then think that that won't have a negative consequence down the line. And that's where the Republicans have it right for the most part. You can't sacrifice now for later. But we also can't deny that we've had Republican presidents that have been warmongering machine people who have these special interest groups that are, you know, creating this war machine that keeps feeding into these cycles of trauma. We're traumatizing the globe by getting into these wars. And then we're setting into motion another cycle of family generational trauma all across the globe. That's what we're recreating by having all these wars. So who are you, Democrats? Who are you, Republicans? Figure out what your freaking values are, so that when the American voter votes, they know who they're voting for. We're supposed to be a constitutional republic. We're supposed to have representatives of our individual opinion, our needs. Do we have it right now? Do we have it? I don't know. I don't think so. But I have hope and I have faith. And I believe that this series of events that have happened can actually be beneficial, right? If you have this significant of a trauma to the citizens, they finally start to wake up and realize that there's a problem. And I think we're already starting to see that. If you look at some of the most recent news headlines for the Trumpians, they are noticing how they're changing their tune towards each other, right? Biden and Trump had a conversation, but you also have to realize that Trump has been divisive in his speech, right? And his children, the Republicans, especially the staunch Republicans, have picked up that I'm gonna keep insulting you and insulting you and insulting you until you feel defeated. So no, Trump is not a perfect candidate, but he's the right one. Whether you choose to believe it or not, he's the right one. He's standing up for the most truth that I can see. If there's a candidate in the future that's a Democrat that seems to fit my values and alignments better, I'll vote for that person. But right now, there is none. I don't see one Democratic candidate that fits that. The only one that had in the past would be Tulsi Gabbard, but I don't see anybody who is autonomous, who has their own thinking, who is not bought out by special interest groups, who's not just keeping control and a monopoly over our citizens. I don't see that. And again, on the Republican side, I think that is also a problem. You know, we have two imperfect parents trying to raise imperfect children, and we need the love of the Father, man. We need to get right with God. We were a nation under God. That's how we were established. Yes, there's a separation of church and state, but that doesn't mean that we don't need God. That doesn't mean that we don't need the values and the principles that started this nation. So that's all my thoughts for the day. I just I wanted to put a thank you and a gratitude out there before I forget. So there's a guy named Joe Everson who he's a very talented man. He does singing and painting at the same time, doing like the Star Spangled Banner, and he does drawing. And this guy has painted this iconic image of the assassination attempt, and is using the proceeds to benefit Corey Coppertor. And I'm going to include that link in the description below. I would like for, if anybody feels like they want to go to that Joe Everson. He's raising money. So if you want to buy that picture, just go to and buy it from him. You know, I'm trying to keep my motives clear. That's what I wanted to do. That's why I took so long off in between my prior video and then the most recent ones, is because I've been working on purifying my own motives. I don't want to do this channel for selfish reasons. I don't want to do this for prideful reasons. I'm trying to clear up my motives. And that way I know that I can make videos that are out of a purified intent. It's the only way that I know how to do this right. Because I do love my country and I love it so much that I know that I needed to work on some significant issues going on in my life. I needed to figure out why I was angry and cursing all the time, which I feel like I figured out. I needed to figure out, you know, that need for wanting to feel validated and have attention. I figured out that I needed to be on my own and figure out my life and start my own company, which I started. I started a dog company called Charlie's Chewies. I have my own YouTube channel for that. And I needed to do that before I started talking more openly about how I feel about this country, because I've got to take care of myself first, and then I can then start using this platform as a way to share my thoughts as a you know, you want to call it influencer or a leader or somebody with an opinion. I can't do that if I have impure motives. And so that's why I'm back. I'm back now. I feel like I'm at a better place, and hope this helps you. I just want to say thank you to all the folks who are supporting this channel, and thank you for your feedback. You're not alone. If you're out there and you're struggling in life, you are not alone. You're never alone. God loves you. Jesus loves you. He's always with you. He'll never forsake you. And God bless the USA. I'll see you in the next episode.